All right, so let's recap data types from what we did in class today. If you recall, I said there are 5 primitive data types. Those primitive data types would include integers, um, doubles or floats, Boolean values, which are true and false, um, string values, which are not really primitive, but we're going to treat them like that for now, and char variables, char values. Now, for each one of these data types, there are operators, things that we do on them. For integers, we obviously can multiply, add, subtract, multiply, divide, and then we have the mod operator, which is going to give us the remainder. Again, order of operations, we can use parentheses, all of that. The same applies to doubles, right? We can multiply, divide, use the mod operator, we can use parentheses. Boolean operators, we have the logical and, which are 2 ampersands together. We have logical or, we have less than, we have greater than, and then we have not equals, and then we have equals, logical equals. Strings, the only real operator that we're going to talk about at this point is the concatenation operator. And then characters, again, they're kind of a weird thing. So you can add and subtract, and you can concatenate. You can do some other weird things with characters, but we really won't do a whole lot with them. If you recall, also we talked about variables and how variables work. When you want to use a variable, the way that you declare a variable is you specify a data type. In this case, it would either be, or as of today, it would either be integers, doubles, Boolean strings, or characters, because that's all we really talked about. You have a variable name. Then if you want to initialize it with some sort of value, you can actually stop right here, just declaring a variable and say, I have an integer, and this is the name of my variable. But you can also assign it a value using the equal sign, and then a value that has the same type that you declared. So if you declared an integer type, then you have to put an integer on the right side of the equal sign. If you declared a string, then it would have to be a string on this side of the equal sign. If you don't do that, you'll get a compiler error, syntax error that says that you can't assign the value that you've specified over here into the data type that you've said that you're going to use. What I want to do is just some more of what we did in class. So I'm going to create a new project. I'm going to call it variables for now, just to keep it simple, because we're going to use some of these data types, declare a few variables, and mess with some operations on those variables. Establish my project. All right, so I'm going to clean this up just a little bit. Like I said, I prefer to have my braces aligned so I can easily see them, and I'll usually drop comments on the end of my braces so I know exactly what I'm looking at. Okay, so let's start with integers, right? They're simple enough. So if we wanted to simply create an integer variable, we can declare it just like that. Just as I just described, we have a data type, a variable name. In this case, we're calling it x. Not very descriptive, but for simple demonstration, it's sufficient. And on the right side of the equal sign, we're giving it a value that is the same data type. It's an integer as what we said x would be. If we try to do something like this, we will get a compiler error, because when we put quotes around the 100, that's telling the compiler that we want to have a string version of the number 100, but we're trying to store it in an integer variable, so that won't work. So let's remove that, and instead of having 100, let's make it 10. As I mentioned, you can also declare multiple variables at one time. You can even assign them values as you go, 5 for instance, and say, I don't know, 10, right? So again, these are shorthands, kind of, or shorter ways to do the same thing as this. You could do all of this on a line per declaration or per instantiation of the variables. That's perfectly good. or you can combine them as I've done here. Now, if we want to do some math, we can either do it in a print statement, for instance, just to kind of demonstrate doing math, or we could create a new variable. So if we're getting started with Java and the language, maybe we want to create an extra variable just to make things simple for ourselves and make sure we can see everything. So if I declare another variable and call it sum, and maybe I want to put the sum of x and y in this variable, right? And then if I print system.out.println sum, what I should get is the sum of x and y. If I run this now, I get 110. So the value of x is 100, the value of y is 10. 100 plus 10 equals 110. A good way to trace this, or if we were to follow this from beginning to end, just as a for instance, if we start at line 9, we say we create a variable called x. It's an integer, and we're assigning the value of 100 to it. And then we create a variable called y. We give it the value of 10 on line 10. Then we create two things that are called a and b. One's called a. We don't put anything in it. By default, if you don't assign a value, Java gives it a value of 0 for integers. Same with b. It's a 0 value. And then we declare a variable c, and we give it the value of 5. And we do another variable called d, and we give it a value of 10. So with those 6 statements, essentially, we are now at this point in our program flow. What we do now is we declare another variable called sum. It's an integer, so we have int sum. And if you look at this on the right side of the equation, it says sum gets the value of x plus y. Well, we're going to go look in our variable x. We're going to see that there's 100 there. And then we're going to look at our variable y, and we're going to see that there's 10 there. So 100 plus 10 is 110, and we will store that value in our variable sum. And then the final thing we do is if we look at output, we say we want to print whatever is stored in sum. What's in sum is the value 110. So that's what we would print. So that's a really simple example of doing integer math. If we wanted to do concatenation, we could have string s1. So s1 for string 1, it says 100. We could have string s2 equals 10. So similar to the math problem we just did, obviously this is no longer relevant over here. Now if we do system.out.println s1 plus s2, will we get 110 again? No. Let's see what we get. We get 10,010, but really what we're getting is 100, and then we're getting the number 10 printed right beside it. So the plus operator, when it comes to dealing with strings, is all about concatenation. It's about joining two strings together. If we had a third value, say an integer, we'll call it I, and we had 10, or let's do this. Let's do 100. And we do s1 plus s1 plus I. What we will get is we'll get 100, 100, because it's just going to concatenate it. Anytime we have a string variable or string value and we concatenate it with anything else, what we result in is a string value. So the reason that that's happening is because we're getting 100 printed right beside 100. So simple enough. Boolean variables, we'll say flag 1 is true, flag 2 is false, right? If I print flag 1, just like it is, it's going to look and see what variable or what value is in flag 1. We're going to see that it's true, and if we print this, we'll just simply get a true. It's that easy. You'll notice again that the true and false are in blue. That means they're reserved words. Case matters. It can't be capital T and lowercase or capital F. It has to be all lowercase. We can do other logical operators. If we said flag 1 and flag 2, that would be the equivalent of saying true and false, which would be false. If we did or, we have the two pipes. True or false would be true. We can also do things like printing inequalities. So 7 greater than 9. True or false? Is 7 less than 9? The answer is true. So we'll see true. So I think that covers a lot of what we talked about today in terms of examples.